What's up, guys? Essie and Scrappy, Lucas De Silva here, Jason Fulmore here. I want to say episode 9-ish, somewhere in that range. At that point, we're going to stop remembering the episode numbers. But this weekend in the Southeast, obviously, what we're going to talk about, big weekend for the national wrestling scene as a whole. At the senior level, obviously, Final X this weekend. Hashtag Jordan got robbed. Hashtag stop tramp stamps on singlets. Which that trend I hate more than anything is the tramp stamps on singlets. Please get rid of them. The logos underneath the freestyle bar, those are horrible. But for the Southeast specifically, let's get a little bit back on topic. But 14U and 16U national duels, also known as schoolboys and cadets, to the older ones of the crew. You had a chance to sit down and talk to a coach that I know very well, and the new head coach of Lemon Bay, formerly of the Circle W, Jeff Ragan, and then we'll take a look ahead into junior duels and 14U and junior girls. Let's start, though, Jason, in Rosemont Park, Illinois, where 16U duels were competed, had a handful of teams from across the Southeast. In the end, in the final, it was Iowa defeating Illinois on Illinois' home turf, 38-32 for the Greco championship. Why don't you start us off? Talk about some of the teams in the Southeast that really did well up there.
Yeah, well, before I jump to them, man, how good was Iowa? Like they just looked. I mean, they were just killers. I mean, just
they were honestly, on one this weekend. Yep.
In fact, I think and I could be wrong, but I think Iowa won it in both Greco and freestyle in 16U, and Pennsylvania won it in both Greco and freestyle in 14U. So
yes, and funnily enough, in both styles, it was the same final. It was Iowa over Illinois in both, and it was PA over Ohio in both. So a very fascinating trend for where wrestling might be heading in the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, that was super interesting. But let's go ahead and give a shout out to Team Tennessee in Greco. They made the top 8. That means that they are All-Americans. A fantastic run by Team Tennessee. They and before we get too far into this, I want to make sure that I let everybody know not all records are created equal, and Tennessee, they battled their way through their pool, ended up taking second in their pool, but then to be fair, they took it on the chin a little bit in the gold silver pool. I mean, they lost 4, Now they're wrestling the best. Did other teams do exceptionally well on day 2 compared to them? Yes. Was it the same competition? Was it the same level of competition? Absolutely not. So we're not knocking any records here or anything along those lines, but we are kind of acknowledging the different levels of competition and that sort of thing. And that also goes for the kids or those wrestlers that made the all tournament teams, because, I remember last year, Case and Rourke wrestled awesome for Team Tennessee. He didn't make the all-tournament team. I think he only had one loss, and that was to the eventual Fargo national champ in freaking 16U. So that, keep that in mind as we go through this. And you and I haven't delved into all of the records yet and the matches yet and everything else. So there might be somebody out there who went 7-1, who had a heck of a tournament, but we may not necessarily remember that.
Yeah, I know in 14U, when we get there, I'll kind of touch on a few of them. As I was writing the post on SCWrestle.com, I'm doing the recaps for 14, 16U. There were a couple guys that I noticed that had incredible tournaments and just took the loss to a killer.
Yeah. All right. So Team Tennessee lost their last match, 38-37 to Team Utah, but they did finish top 8. Georgia Black made the bronze copper pool, taking 14th overall. Some of the other teams, you were doing the write-ups, they struggled a little bit.
Yeah, and I think to an extent, I think North Carolina caught Illinois off the scale. I think it was. There were a couple that ran into some killers, but as well, Alabama, North Carolina, even South Carolina, forfeits, man, hurt them. Going into this tournament with 3-4 forfeits, I mean, you can't really compete with that, especially at the highest level. So I feel like that I talked about it on the write-ups. There's a lot that went, but the forfeits obviously didn't help Florida finished with a winning record, going 4-3. Bama, North Carolina, South Carolina took a win each, and then Georgia Red went 2-3. But obviously, when you look at the teams, each team had some guys really go and battle. So at the 16U division for Greco, Jason, why don't you talk about the guys that made the all-tournament team?
Yeah, so shout out to Floridians Everett Stevens, 100 pounds, Jose Gutierrez, 152 pounds, Willie White, 160 pounds, and Michael Mako, who we'll get to in a second, 7-0 at 220 pounds. They were all undefeated. Alabama Stone Phillips at 120 was 7-0. And Cy Fowler was from Team Tennessee was 6-0 at 170. And Kason Howell of South Carolina is 5-0 at 182 pounds. Those are your Southeast representatives on the Greco alternate tournament team. And when we get to freestyle and we finish freestyle, we'll talk a little bit about two of those individuals in a little more detail.
Yeah.
All right. So what happened in freestyle?
So Iowa defeated Illinois 41-26 for the title. If this was soccer, how we could talk about City winning the treble, Iowa, they do the double, as they would call it. They win both styles. No All-American squad from the Southeast, unfortunately. Highest placer was Tennessee, finishing in 16th, losing in a heartbreaker 38-37 to Utah. Just for a quick second, let's talk about that Team Tennessee for a minute. Because you and I, when we talked about Team Tennessee, we said that this team was primed and ready to go. And good performances, no doubt. But I feel like we both, I thought they would have been a little bit higher up the placard. I'll be honest. I was expecting a little more out of them. No disrespect. Obviously, they put together a great team and just ran some tough teams during the event.
Well, it's one of those things. I mean, really, it's one of those things where you lose some momentum, you lose some spots in a duel, and it is a duel. So, and you talked about it last weekend, scoring a point, and going 3-1 for your score in freestyle or Greco, as opposed to 5-0 or a pin in folk style, which is 6 or whatever. Man, you give up forfeits, you give up falls, or you're losing wrestlers, score points. When you lose 38-37,
I mean that's
what it comes down to.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's one of those things where just obviously it's no shade Team Tennessee. They battled their hearts out and kind of finished where they did and wrestled real well. Like, let's not get that twisted, by the way. Especially in freestyle, Hudson Chittum and Maximus Norman were on Demon Time. The day we're on one. We'll get to the alternate team, but why don't you take a second and talk about the other Southeastern squads?
Yeah, so Georgia Black finished 4-4. I can't remember if it was in Greco or freestyle, but they were close with Tennessee and then ended up losing to them. Tennessee actually got up because it started at 182 and then ended up like getting so far ahead that Georgia Black couldn't actually make the comeback. Georgia Black, for those of you that want to know, we got a little Southeast versus Southeast rivalry. We got a 36-34 loss to Team Florida, who finished 7-2. Alabama was 3-5. And then we get to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia Red, who, pick up a win here and there. But again, you give up forfeits, you're going to struggle a little bit. And that's just the way it works. All tournament team, you mentioned Max Norman and Hudson Chittum for Team Tennessee. Who else from the Southeast made the all tournament team?
So as you mentioned, for Team Tennessee, they were only 2 at 88 and 170 pounds respectively. For Florida, it was Leandro Soto and Michael Mako, both going 9-0. We'll get to Mako and a certain someone else at the end, but man, he wrestled good this weekend. I caught a couple of his matches. He just looked real, real good. For Alabama, it was John Stewart and Landon Bell at 32 and 45 respectively, going 7-0. Georgia had 3, the only state in the Southeast in freestyle to have 3. Blue Stifler, Nate Askew, Dylan Reel, 8-8, 6-0. Let me tell you, and I'm going to, for a minute, Nate Askew is a cool one for me because I remember seeing him as one of the Litlands at Collins Hill with Tiana and Tavion, her older brother. So it's cool to see Nate and the way he's grown. It's incredible. And the way he's wrestling now, it's so cool to see. So shout out to the Askews. For South Carolina, it was Kason Howell, the only one. But I guess, we got to mention, and I guess it's some severance for him. Hal and Mako, the only two Southeasterners to go undefeated in both, which is one hell of an achievement to make the entire weekend without taking a loss. That level, a quick salute and tip of the cap to them.
Yeah, because they were only 2 of 12. I mean, there were only 12 wrestlers who made the all-tournament team in both styles. And if you watched, I mean, I watched a little bit of Case and Hal's matches, definitely Michael Malko's matches. And man, I'm really excited. If both of them are in Fargo, they're going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Agreed.
All right, so let's move to 14U's Greco in the state of Pennsylvania. We already talked about Pennsylvania defending their home turf and taking it in both styles. Why don't you start us out in Greco and give us a little bit of a rundown?
PA Blue, they took home the win. They talk about beating Ohio 50-27 rather handily. I mean, let's just call it what it is. If you watched any of the 14U duels as I did, PA was the best team all weekend. It was
easy.
It was rather clear. I mean, they were beating teams by 70, ladies and gentlemen. This wasn't them eking out wins. This was them beating top 10, 15 states in the country by 50. They ran the score up on, I want to say, Indiana. Like, there was one where I was like, just then stop the fight. Stop the fight. It's over. But
throw in the towel.
Please, for God's sake, just forfeit at this point. It's getting ugly. But sadly for the Southeast, no All-Americans. Florida took the highest finish of 15th. I mean, it wasn't a great weekend for the Southeast. Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, we talked about it. Forfeits killed them. I looked – Alabama specifically, it hurt. When you look at Alabama, they won almost 41%, like almost like damn near 40% of the matches they wrestled, they won. And the forfeits killed them. Like,
absolutely. You just can't be competitive. I mean, Alabama, you can win a ton of matches.
They finished 1-7, and I jam believe they would have finished 3-4, they would have been in the mix in at least 2 more of their duels. They lost, like, I want to say Kentucky by 3, and I want to say like Arkansas, because I looked through all the brackets, they lost 2 duels by like 3 points, and I was like, come on, like, you can get a body, like, come on, Bama, come on, but either way, Tennessee went 3-3. Georgia went 4-2. Georgia in their final match with a 10-point win over Tennessee. At the end of this month, probably Southeast 7 rankings will return. I'm going to tell you guys something. These head-to-head dual wins, they're going to play a big part in the way I do rankings. But beyond that, Jason, why don't you talk about the 14U Greco all-tournament teams and who from the Southeast made that distinguished list?
Yeah, so I can't wait till your top 7 from the Southeast comes out. It'll be interesting because you had some wins in certain weight or certain ages and things like that. But then in another age, somebody else won. So it's pretty interesting because Tennessee won at 16U, but Georgia won at 14U. So
yeah.
All right, so down for the all-tournament team, Tennessee led the way. They had 4, and we talked about it last week, right? Jackson Lane, Gary Hyde, Dylan Villers, Ja'Kai Roller, all undefeated in Greco. All were fantastic.
In there too. That team's so good.
Tennessee's got a good squad. Florida had 3, Diego Roberti, and then 2 absolute studs, Giovanni Tavar and Giovanni Solis. And they were fantastic. We'll get to talking a little bit more about them in a few minutes.
And I got something specific about Giovanni Solis. We'll get to him. We'll get there when we get there.
Okay. Georgia, Cruz Hazel, and I don't know if I said Cruz's last name right.
I believe it's Hazel. I believe that is how you say it.
And then obviously Araya Mills. I mean, just a superb. I mean, another one of the Mills gang.
Another Mill.
But Araya is a superb wrestler. He is absolutely fantastic. And Alabama, man, Caden Clark and Caleb Gray Lowe both wrestled fantastic in Greco, and they were undefeated and made the Greco all-tournament team as well. You're going to hear a few more of these names when we now transition to freestyle. And man, so was Pennsylvania, do you think they were closer to the field in Greco or in freestyle?
Neither. No, like if we're really gonna look at these scores, they were in both styles beating teams by 60 and 70. And ladies and gentlemen, let me try to put this in context. You can score 5 maximum in a match. There's 15 weight classes.
Is there only 15 in 14U? Is that right?
Or 14, there might be 16 or 7. Give me 20 seconds, I can tell you, because it's mind-boggling.
But that's still
There's
impressive as
18
hell.
weight classes, 18 weight classes.
Okay.
You do the math, and they're beating teams by scores of 77-4. Like,
Right.
what are we talking about? Like, PA has continued to prove time and time again, and this is coming from a guy who took losses to PA, and I was on teams with guys like Maddie Singleton, Kate McCrae, Nick Masters, on and on and on, and we challenge them, but when man, PA #1, man, they've always been that team, and they continue to be that team. I'd love to know how, and this could be a future project. I would love to know who's won the most of these duels in each style and age. I'd
Oh,
be fast.
that would be really interesting. I don't know
I
that
don't know
we
who
really
has.
know.
I just know PA has won a lot.
Yeah, they have.
They've won a lot. But
Well,
when it comes to this,
go
when
ahead.
it comes to the Southeast, Georgia claims All-American finish in 8th with a 47-32 loss to Iowa in their last duel. Florida had a great showing in their own right, just missing out on All-American, finishing second in the bronze copper pool, taking 10th overall. Jason, talk about teams, man, because there's one, man, they wrestled good, just didn't get the draw.
Yeah. So first, before I get to those, a real shout out. Georgia and Florida wrestled outstanding.
Yes.
They really did. They to make the top 10 in freestyle, it was loaded. There were a lot of really good squads. So again, both of those squads really, I mean, Georgia got over the line and they ended up making top 8. Florida just missed out. Team Tennessee, 5-3. We already talked about them in Greco. They're studs. I mean, we are talking, 5 that made the all-tournament team in freestyle. Roller again, Lane again, Gary High again, Dylan Villers, Dominic Cordero. But again, 5 wrestlers, 18 weight classes. If you don't get it done at the other weights, I don't care how. I mean, if you have those 5 undefeated wrestlers, you're not going to, if the others don't come through, you're not going to win duels.
Agreed. No, agreed. I mean, that is what it is. And you talk about the all tournament team for Tennessee to have 5 on there is a great accomplishment.
Yeah, it is. And, North Carolina, they went 3-3. South Carolina, shout out, a little tip of the cap to South Carolina. They were 1-6. They didn't wrestle great. Alabama was 0-6. They did not wrestle great. But South Carolina put their team together pretty much last minute, and some of those kids came up and wrestled well. And you know what? For a 14U team, so one of the things that stood out to me when we were talking about the preview last week was that, the 16Us, a lot of them on Florida's team or Georgia's team or whatever, they had wrestled 14Us. What North Carolina and South Carolina need to do is these kids who now have wrestled here at 14Us, they need to be on the 16U team next year.
Agreed.
Because that's how you're going to move from a 1-6 to a 3-3 to a 5-3 to this, to this, to this.
It's that level of development that I feel like Georgia, Florida are ahead of the curve. I feel like Tennessee's getting there. I mean, you look at my rankings, Georgia, Florida, #1 and #2. Tennessee was #3. And then Alabama, South Carolina, and North Carolina further down, Mississippi in 7th. And this is where things get really fascinating, is Mississippi is kind of like a biodome, where now we know how the Southeast can develop. And you basically have a blank palette. Mississippi, this is going to be their 3rd state tournament this year upcoming, officially in the MIHSAA. So you'll now get to see a full developmental period for them. Just as now we're seeing North Carolina, Bama, South Carolina, they need to start along that process. You need to see, like you said, these 14, you guys move up to 16. The 16s need to go to juniors, and it needs to be that continual process.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes because you're right. I mean, that's going to be huge when we're talking about the juniors and the junior girls. But we'll get to those junior girls in a second.
We'll get there when we get there.
All right. Speaking of Georgia and Florida and Alabama and South Carolina, they also had some all tournament team members. Who else did they have?
So for Team Georgia, Araya Mills, again, he makes in both. Cody Clark, shout out to Cody Clark, little brother of DJ Clark. He went 8-0 on the weekend. Florida, it's the two Giovannis, Tovar and Solis. And to not disrespect Tovar, who in his own right is growing into a killer. This kid, Giovanni Solis, I did not know who he was until the Florida State tournament. I'll be honest, I really didn't know. I was unaware. I obviously knew of EJ, his older brother at South Dade.
Right.
Didn't know of Giovanni. Then I watched him beat, respectfully, the door hinges off a kid that I know and thought highly of in Derek Williams of Bay in the finals. Took him to task. And now to watch this kid a couple of times I did over this weekend, man, bro, that kid is something special. He's on his way. For Alabama, it was Caden Clark. Shout out to Caden Clark making an undefeated team in both. Quick shout out to him. And then up top for South Carolina, Jesse Howard, 187. He goes 7-0 on the weekend. By the way, his 7-0, when I looked at it, only one forfeit. He wrestled and won 6 matches. So a quick tip of the cap to him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we've mentioned some names repeatedly here. So there were 29 that made the alternate team in both styles. We've already mentioned Roller, Lane, Gary Hyde, Villers from Tennessee. We've mentioned Araya Mills and Araya Mills from Georgia. You've got Caden Clark from Alabama, Giovanni Tovar from Florida. But I mean, I don't want to like say the best of the group because that's not really fair to everybody else. But I agree with you. Giovanni Solis he's just special. I mean, 130 pounds. I mean,
he's so good, and the big thing for me that I loved watching him was in the biggest moments, he was calm. A true gamer, understood biggest moments. Duels were close. If Solis was stepping up to the table to check
you felt great.
Yes, you felt good as a Floridian or as a Southeasterner watching them wrestle Indiana, for instance. Kind of damn near cheering for Team Florida because I'm like, hey, Southeastern here. I want them to take the win. And
it's funny. I converted you.
Basically, at this point. But for sure, man, Giovanni Solis, he's something special, man. He's one. Man, he's so good off the counterattack as well. You put the pressure on him. He can find angles, get you to the edge. He's just so good, that kid. So quick tip of the cap to him. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So earlier today, I had an opportunity to speak with Coach Jeff Ragan, who left Woodward Academy and is now the new head coach at his alma mater in Florida at Lemon Bay High School. It took me if you know Coach Ragan, he can have a conversation. So this is a clip. This is 10 minutes or ish of our conversation. If you want to hear a much longer conversation, I'm going to post that tomorrow with my conversation with Coach Ragan, talking about a lot of different things. But I talked a little bit about leaving Woodward and accepting this role down in Florida, and kind of what he was looking forward to the most as he ventured into a new area. All right. I'm here with Coach Jeff Ragan. First, Coach, how are things in your neck of the woods? And I know your neck of the woods has changed a little bit, and we're going to get to that. But how are you doing just generally?
Generally doing much better. Sort of went through a few unfun things during the season, from too many hospital visits and too many hospital trips and surgeries. And, I got to tell you, as fun as it was for the guys and for me to end on a high note, win that 5th state title in 5 years at Woodward Academy, it was bittersweet because ultimately, I was, trying to just stay standing at the state duels. If I couldn't, yelling at the refs, not that that's how I do things, but at least making myself heard to my student athletes and to the refs was almost impossible. I remember I had a nurse watching me from the stands, and if I would stand up, she'd give me the whole sit back down because you're only out of this hospital for this reason. And they slipped me out of the hospital basically,
so
probably 24
so I don't
hours
think
before
many
I
of
got
us
to go.
knew that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to delve into that too much, but I think it's important for the context. For those that don't know, you went through some things when you were at the Citadel, and kind of have been working through that and those sorts of things over, a period of time. And it just kind of became a thing this year because you were doing really well a couple of years ago. I remember having a conversation.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you have a lot of surgeries and, you're on dialysis for 2 years and you have a transplant and you do all these things. And that's sort of part of the, experience of, all right, now I'm on anti-rejection drugs for the rest of my life. And, I'm grateful that my brother gave me that kidney and that I'm able to have such a good match that, some people might take, 40 pills a day. I'm closer to 24 pills a day. But, things that might be, normal for some people, just affect me a little differently. But I had a little bit of a hiccup maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Me and Nick Masters, we were going at it after Fargo, and he was talking a big game. He got second at Fargo, and he was, look how good I am. And I said, listen, I've been wrestling you with just one hand, since I met you. I said, don't make me pull my other arm out because I had a fistula in my other arm, And he's like, oh, and then of course I proceeded to get a really good leg lace with the wrong arm. And next thing I know, trying to rub dirt on it for a week. And, I told the doctor what happened and they said, you need to come to emergency room right away. And, I waited till the end of the day on Friday and I was back to school on Monday, but that was 600 internal stitches, 180 staples. So literally it ruptured in the middle of surgery. So I try to blow things off and act like everything's fine. And sometimes they are, and sometimes you push through them. And, this experience this year kind of was a reminder that, waiting to retire to where you want to go and what you want to do. And, spending the rest of your life with someone that you love dearly and doing what you love, where you love doing it, that perspective of why wait, this changed a lot of things for my mindset. I got married, only a couple of weeks ago. We're moving down there. She's going to be the a dean at Port Charlotte High School, and I'm going to take over as the basically honors math teacher and head wrestling coach, which is what my dad did 45 years ago. So it was something that maybe I could have brushed off. I think I had a fever of 106 2 days in a row right around Christmas time, and I couldn't shake it, and they threw me in the hospital for a better part of a week. And when they let me out to do what I thought I needed to do, I tried to get back into things and was back in the hospital in a matter of a few weeks later. And same thing. It was 11 or 12 days in the hospital, 18 doctor visits, 2 surgeries, all the things going on literally on the day, every day, to the point where when I was winning the state title, my wife was driving down and giving me intravenous medicine, and I had tubes coming out of my chest during the state tournament. So, we got through it, we got over it, but it definitely was okay. I'm ready to do something.
So was it that experience that prompted you to go, you know what, I need to step back from Woodward, and then the Lemon Bay opportunity opened up and you said, I got to take that, or how did that kind of entire process happen?
It sort of all fell into place. It definitely was one of those kind of things where, my doctor after the, more or less after that, I had another surgery. I finally had the tubes removed from my chest and, went in to see the doctor, and they said, listen, I don't think that, just pushing yourself any further is going to help things. The only way it's going to help you is time off. And I think it's when I decided to, take that time off, and I needed to take some medical, leave. I think that really is what got me to think about my future, about our future, my wife and I's, and my, what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And actually during my, more or less spring break, right around that time, I went and visited, and that's what it was like, oh, this is what I want to do. So it really helped me open my eyes to that perspective, just like Woodward Academy was a great opportunity for 9 years. And I think I would have never considered the opportunity of Woodward Academy had I not gone through the things I went through and realized I want to spend more time with my kids. My daughter's in college at Savannah School of Art and Design. My son is wanting to be an engineer, and I want him to continue, I want him to continue to stay and finish out school. And he was almost done. And I think he wants to go to Georgia Tech. So I think that's something that I want to let that opportunity happen. And look, man, there's flights 10,000 flights a day coming, within an hour of where I'm at. So I can see him, plenty every other weekend and, in the summers, and spend a lot of time and get out there on the water. And he gets to experience a little bit of what, my life was like before I left for Oklahoma State University. But
yeah, so that's where I wanted to go next, which was, this is a coming home party. I mean, so for those people who don't know, I wrestled in Florida before you wrestled in Florida, but when your dad was wrestling or was coaching at Lemon Bay, and I mean, we knew the name, and we knew the program, the Mike Schicks and so on and so forth at Lemon Bay. So it's got to be a pretty cool feeling to go back there and have an opportunity to kind of, step into the same role that your dad was in.
Yep. I try to leave it up to maybe a higher power in terms of, making that decision for us. We interviewed at a lot of places. We visited a lot of places. We looked at a lot of places, North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina. But I just kept that pull of coming home, and ultimately it had to work out for my wife. It had to work out for us. It had to work out for me. And, it really just became something that I think on the 11th hour, like, we had to make a decision. I greatly respect the time of everybody else who tried to, discuss this, with me as an opportunity to head their program. Something fell into our lap, again, within, I want to say by 5 o'clock on Friday, we were going to make a decision, and the decision was made for us at like 4:55 on that Friday, when we got 2 phone calls and said, we want you to do this thing. So ultimately, when all that fell into place, you just knew it was the right place, and you're right. 45 years ago, my dad started this program. I looked up to Mike Schick. He was the epitome of what you wanted to be as a wrestler at Lemon Bay High School for my dad. Doug Schick, Mike Schick, Roy Rain, Jerry Von Brock, all these like amazing wrestlers that I got to go on bus trips, and I got to,
and eventually Jeff Ragan, but we'll get,
yeah. I mean, look, I honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do as a wrestler. I just knew how my dad's face lit up when he would talk about those wrestlers, and how, we would go since from 1992 was the first national tournament I went to. And that was, Mike's first All-American title. It was like, I'm going to go watch Mike, and that was in Northern Iowa. And I remember just being on a vehicle with a bunch of my dad's ex-wrestlers and going up there to see, him wrestle and see him compete. And he competed, 92, 93, 94, I believe, and watching him All-American, watch him place, watch him, but of course at that time I got to watch Pat Smith win his 4th national title. I'm like, yep, that's where I'm going. So it was a journey, but at the same time, every goal I set for myself when I was wrestling at Lemon Bay High School, I set it from a perspective of, I would take the long walk to the water fountain from the wrestling room, because he's all right, be back in 2 minutes. And instead of taking the water fountain that was right there where everybody get in line, I'd take the long walk, and there was a trophy case, and I could see every one of my dad's ex-wrestlers and every one of their accomplishments. They had little pictures and they're all little trophy stances, and I would look at what they did, and I said, okay. So I got a piece of paper out, and I was like, okay, what did Mike do? Okay, he was a 3-time finals, 2-time champ. Okay, goal. All right, what else did he do? Oh, he was outstanding wrestler. Okay, goal. You know what I mean? And yeah, I set other goals for myself, but I wanted to set those goals. I wanted to be an All-American. He was an All-American. I'm going to be an All-American. There was a lot of things. The influence of my dad's coaching and my dad's wrestlers was big on me saying, well, I want to be, just as good as those guys, or, just so my dad will look at me that way, and nothing towards my dad. He's just one of those kind of people that doesn't give compliments out. He's pretty good at the left-handed compliments, but he's not really good at the, hey, you did a good job, So it's like, hey, maybe I wasn't a complete bozo, but what happened, this all kind of started in the fall of this last year. Before I got sick, I was invited to get inducted in the Hall of Fame. And my dad was going to go because he was inducted the year before, but he didn't go because of COVID. I was going to go that year, but my brother was also on one of the teams that was getting inducted at the same time, because my brother had wrestled for my dad, and they'd won a state title during one of those years. And so all three were going to go. We were so excited. We got tickets and we got a place to stay. And then the hurricane just, demolished essentially all of Fort Myers,
Yeah.
through Englewood. And we're talking 5 hours of sustained, category 4 and 5 winds, or 3 or 4 hours of this, and just total devastation. So me missing out, but seeing how the repairs were going and hearing from my friends and seeing their Facebook posts and just going, oh my goodness. So obviously when I had my spring break, that's where I went and visited. I wanted to go see how everybody's doing, because that was the first break I had since the season already started. And I was supposed to sneak down there like in November.
Yeah.
So it was just one of those things that I wanted to see how everybody was doing. And that's what sort of led, one thing led, the principal was one of my mom's ex drama students. The AD was one of my dad's ex wrestlers.
Right.
Mike's over there. He's and David Kelly, he wrestled for Georgia State. He wrestled teammates of mine, and he wrestled for my dad. And you just looked at all these alumni that were coming back, and, just the conversation of like, wouldn't that be cool? And I'm like, and that turned into something that actually worked out. But it all came full circle, and I'm just excited for the opportunity that I wasn't going to force it, but if it was the right thing and it was an opportunity for me to say, life's precious, you go through some of the things that I've gone through, whether, my doctor's like, look, your arm literally exploded because you're fistula, because you decided to wrestle with it. And we had to sew it back together so you didn't bleed to death. And I'm like, it was just a flesh wound. This is Monty Python and the Quest of the Holy Grail, right? I chopped your arm off. You're like, no, you didn't. That's kind of how I've always approached everything. I think I remember.
All right. So like I said, previous to that clip with Coach Ragan, I actually have a much longer conversation with him, talking about lots of different things. I'm sorry.
Coach Ragan can talk.
Yeah, he can. And you know what? We have a good time. We talk about a lot of different things. It was a good time. I'll drop that tomorrow. Let's now shift to this week and the duels, 14U girls duels, the junior girls duels, the juniors. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you a loaded question.
Oh, goodness. Of course you are.
And my question is, which is a better measure of a team, a duel or a tournament?
I think you find out more about a team's talent in tournaments. I think you find out more about their team and their coaching and their strategy as a duel. Because if it's just one-on-one, I'm wrestling you in an IBT, we're going to find out more about who has the better wrestlers. But where I think you find out more about the better team and the more cohesive unit, I think you find that out way more in duels. So I think it kind of depends on what you're asking for. Now,
well, and I'm asking for the best team. Which is the best way to measure a team?
I think it's duels. I do. I think duels is the better measurement.
I do too. But
I feel like, though, like I said, it depends on what you're looking for specifically. I mean, I know if two teams are tied in my ranking system, I will typically lend to, well, who wins in a duel meet? That's typically where I'm going to lean.
All right, so let's move to the 14U girls. First, before we get to there, the 14U girls, it is a fairly new tournament. This has not been the junior girls a little bit longer, not a ton longer, but definitely longer than the 14U girls. And we have 3 teams. There might be South Carolina in there. I did not get a response from Team South Carolina on their dual rosters.
I don't think Georgia has a 14U. I don't think Georgia has that.
No, I think actually they moved some of their 14Us up to the juniors.
I thought there were. Yeah, there's a couple on there. We'll get to them when we get there. But I don't think they have a 14U. I don't.
Yeah. So for what I know, we've got North Carolina, Florida, and Tennessee. I'll start with Team North Carolina. Coach Lauren Little, Santonio Thompson Jr., and Teague Little are the coaches. This is a team that obviously has a bunch of holes, okay? But it is an opportunity for these 6 young ladies to go out there and compete and to see where they kind of measure up with the rest of the field. Now, Florida, on the other hand, they've got a pretty full squad. So who do you see from Team Florida as being somebody that we should keep an eye on?
For me, the name that jumps off the page is Zoe Delgado at 110 pounds. Saw her at state, and I've heard her name before. I will say, when it comes to the girls on the younger side, I am a little bit unfamiliar, and like I said, look, everybody knows this about me, and let's just call a spade for a second. I'm a Georgia guy, and I know mainly about Georgia. But
Yeah.
working with you, and as we go into other tournaments, I am trying to learn, ladies and gentlemen. So please, if we're talking about teams and I miss out on a girl who's a killer and I just don't know, please no, it is not. Disrespectfully, I just don't know.
Correct. Well, and I put you on the spot, and that's okay, because the truth of the matter is, you know a lot more in the last 3 months about South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama than you did 3 months ago.
Oh, absolutely.
It's an evolution. I will say one person you want to keep an eye on is Maya Alvarado at 101 pounds. Maya is at Lake Highland Prep with Mary Manis. Mary was a Fargo runner-up last year. Maya Alvarado is on her way up. She's definitely one to watch. In Tennessee, it's pretty hard to miss a couple of names, last names. You got a Riley Sturgill, a Caroline Hilton, and if you know Sturgill, that Hunter Sturgill, I think her older brother, and Caroline Hilton, I think, is the younger sister of Cooper Hilton. I've seen Riley wrestle before. I have not seen Caroline wrestle before. I've heard some good things about Delilah Queen at 136.
I was going to say that's one that I've heard, at least I've heard talk of.
So I don't know the forfeits. Typically walking in with 4 forfeits, Team Tennessee is going to struggle a little bit, but this is a pretty new tournament. I don't know how full the teams are going to be.
That's what I was going to say. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of teams come in with 2, 3, 4 forfeits. It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. All right. So let's move to the junior girls, because I'll tell you what, these girls we know about, and we have got some absolute hammers. Tennessee has both a blue and a red squad, but I'm going to let you start in the state of Georgia, because that's the state you know best.
It's the state I know best, and I want to quickly, not to toot my own horn, obviously, because I would never want to do that. Yeah, five fierce and scrappy members on this Team Georgia team, headed up by Donnell Bradley. This team,
Coach Bradley's awesome, by the way.
Oh my God, yeah. This team is nasty. Like, you look at there's a run where you hit 4 in a row, and that 4 in a row is Molly Weiland, Artemis Eaton, Delia Batanzas, Maida Exabu Jones. Oh my Lord. That's a nasty 4 to begin with. May I add as well, girls like May Shanahan, Izzy West on the bench, waiting for a move up in a bump, where the case may be.
Or maybe a Georgia Black and a Georgia Red team.
Which could be, if that is, then lovely. Then you hit this run at 38, 44, 52, 64, 80. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the run. Ellie Kaufman, May Prado, Greta Garbazovas, Genevieve On, Jade Massa. That's a tough 5 in a row, man. That's a nasty little 5 in a row. Oh, and not to mention just Nora Garbazovas and Tessa Lepardo on the bench. Just saying. Just like what? And then Phoebe Melvin and Shizer up top, not to mention girls like Clemens, Jenkins, Jordan Epstein down low. This Georgia team I might go out on a limb and say this might be the best Georgia girls team I've seen in my time. When you look at names on
100%. 100%. Top to bottom, this is this group of girls. Whether it's going to be the black and red team or it's going to be one whole team together or whatever, this group of girls who Coach Bradley has something special. They can make a run.
If you do a second team, you have a second team with Izzy West, Nora Garbazovas, and Tessa Lepardo, who on any other year could have been starters. They just have killers ahead of them. Izzy West is backing up Artemis Eaton. Nora's backing up world team member May Prado. And Tessa Lepardo is backing up Garbazovas. This team is nasty. As we transition into another team, I'm going to be a little bit spoiled. I want to see Georgia versus Tennessee Blue, because I want to see that 164-pound matchup. They did not wrestle at World Team Trial. Boy, I want to see that match. I'm fascinated by that match.
Yeah, so Tennessee Blue, Tennessee Red, that's actually what I got from Team Tennessee. So it looks like they will have 2 different teams. And I'll tell you what.
Which is great.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, both of these teams. I mean, Genesis Gilmore versus May Prado at 144. Potentially, if they
I
run
didn't even
across each
see
other,
that.
Gilmore is a Fargo runner-up. May Prado made a world team. You got Piper Fowler, Genevieve Vaughn. You've just got some absolute studs on Team Tennessee, both on red and blue teams. I mean, both of these teams are fantastic. How many? We've talked about two states. How many states do you think both Georgia and Tennessee can make top 8?
I wouldn't be surprised. I could see it happening. Like if they both get a good run in their pool where they're not hitting, top 5 states 2 times over in their pool, I think it's very possible. But let me tell you something.
Yeah.
I think there's another team that might be poking their hand up in the argument, like, excuse me, we're here too.
And that would be?
That would be the state of Florida.
Yeah, the Sunshine State's got some good. They're tough.
You got both boos. You got Kalani Barrientos, I believe I say that name. Please, Floridians, don't yell at me like you did at State when I was announcing your podiums. I was getting booed and yelled at. El Fury, Anna Villar, excuse me. That team's tough, man, especially down low. If they catch a good run, and you Sofia Delgado on the bench, who's a killer in her own right. So
she's listed second. I don't know if she's on the bench or whether she'll be in front of Anna Villar. I have no clue. But either way, man, one thing you should note is that 164 at this tournament, you got Piper Fowler, who won women's nationals, Grace Leota, who beat Genevieve Vaughn, Grace Leota's from Florida, and Genevieve Vaughn at 164. They're all at 164. 1, 2, and 3 in the 17Us or U17s.
All I want to see there, man, is I want to see Rocky and Apollo. Ding, ding. Just ring the freaking bell and let them go. Just let them go. Hell, I'm excited. Team Florida, they're my dark horse for the weekend. If we're going to look in the Southeast, Tennessee and Georgia, star-studded, and I think can make runs. Florida, if they catch a good run in the pool play, get to a good placement pool, do not be surprised, ladies and gentlemen. Do not be surprised.
All right, so let's finish up with North Carolina and Alabama. North Carolina let's start with Alabama first. They have a few holes, so as a team, 4 forfeits in girls, it's going to hurt you at junior girls because most of these teams are going to have every single weight class.
Yeah, juniors, yeah.
But, to go ahead and tip the cap, I mean, really the stud on Team Alabama is Evelyn Holmes-Smith. She placed at women's nationals. Certainly one of the best 122s around in the country. I think she's ranked nationally in the country.
I believe she is.
It's an opportunity, not just for the Alabama girls, but for all these girls. Because if you can go out and get some quality wins, next time a national rankings come out, you can find yourself on the list.
For sure. National duels for me was a good one. Got wins over Mondragton. That's kind of what got me on my way to being known more nationally. National duels is a great one, especially if you are a little bit under the radar, and you're on a team with a couple holes. This is your moment. This is your time to shine. It's at the end of the day, if someone sees that Alabama lost to Tennessee 70,000-3, but you're the 3 and it's a good win.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And then North Carolina, a little closer to a full squad, only a couple holes down low. A couple girls stick out to me. Jason, who's 1 or 2 that stick out for you?
So I would say Annabelle Rodriguez at 122.
Yep.
Super talented. Kennedy Snow, Teresa Kennedy, Lillian Pendergrast. Certainly down low, although they're kind of around some of those forfeits. So if somebody knows who some of those girls are, they could try to avoid them if they wanted to,
which would be a shame.
But the truth of the matter is that North Carolina, the couple of those names, and then like an Elena Pollock at 64, Wintergale Oxendine, which I think I saw her up at Holy Angels compete. I don't know if she won or took second, but another one to keep an eye on.
For sure.
All
man.
Let's move to the junior boys. And as we begin with the junior boys, and you give your kind of look over, let's start with Team North Carolina because they are in the toughest position with so many forfeits. Is there anybody on Team North Carolina, though, that we should kind of keep an eye on an individual level that we might see on the all tournament team?
So, I mean, obviously, he had a rougher run, but Matthew Foyle, he's the only one that's been there before. So I want to throw him out there just as a guy who might understand how to get through the weekend. Connor Reese and Carson Wentz for me at 1782 in freestyle. Greco would be Shannon and New. Those are the ones for me. Isaiah Pittman, I've heard his name before. You tell me if there's someone I'm missing that maybe I just don't know the name, but like you said, a couple holes for North Carolina hurt them.
Yeah, I think as a team they're going to struggle, but Tayshawn Glover at 220, I believe 220. I think he's 195. I'm sorry, 195. I believe he came down and wrestled at Elite Eight. So if Tayshawn Glover wrestled at Elite Eight, he understands the level of competition.
Yeah,
and to go out and compete at that level. You know where the bar is, and I think he actually did fairly well at Elite Eight. So that might be a name that you want to keep an eye on. All right,
for sure.
So out of the other teams, every single other team is stacked. I mean, Alabama will only have one team, definitely. Florida will only have one team. Georgia and Tennessee could have two teams. Tennessee will probably have one team. I'm not sure about Georgia. Georgia likes to split into two teams. I don't know.
Yeah. Georgia has a real big habit of going with one and then kind of the day or two before adding a second. And it's because we've had a rather interesting history of guys pulling out within 48 hours. So we'd rather just say we're bringing one. And then if we just so happen to have enough for two when we get there, okay, we'll go two. It's happened more than you think. I remember the year I went, we were supposed to have two full teams. And both teams had forfeits. And we had forfeits in different spots. So we couldn't even sometimes move guys. I was like, crap. So I feel like after that run, Georgia was like, okay, we're gonna say one team and then we'll figure it out.
So let's start with Team Georgia. I mean, there's some studs on this team.
Man, this is a really good team for Team Georgia. I mean, the run of 7 in a row in the middle where I'm like, holy Lord. Like that run is Mills, Spalding, Mills, Gorman, Paradise, Larson, Schaefer, Bambinelli. Ugh. That's disgusting. Oh, and on the bench in that group, you have guys like Braden Mitchell, Team Fat Scrappy member, Josh Sanders, Emil Necula, who I would not be surprised if he starts over Seth Larson and Greco, as Seth Larson, quote, despises Greco. So I would imagine that would be the flip there. That's and then guys like Anthony Lowe, Team Fat Scrappy member, Jacob Levy from Carrollton's a killer down low, guys like DJ Clark, Corbin Exabuth Jones. The second team, guys like Taquavius Mills, Brock Hacker, Jaquavian Daniels, and then you got also McKnight and Ashton Anderson on that team. Bro, this team is nasty, and it's a really good Georgia Juniors team, and I'm very interested because this is the group that we've kind of been talking about as, okay, we need to see all of these kids make that jump to the national level. And now we have that opportunity. So I'm very interested to see.
So it's interesting. You didn't actually even mention Jacob Levy, who was a Fargo. Oh, you did? Oh, Fargo runner-up last year. All right.
I said his name. No, I did say his name, but Coach White told me he doesn't like when I talk about Jacob Levy because he likes when I disrespect him. So for Coach White, I'm shutting up. But no, I mean Levy, like you said, Fargo finalist, went 7-1-8 when the kid's a killer, and with how talented he is, it's good to see him back on the duels and going to Fargo as well. So that'll be good.
All right. So where should we transition? Yeah, where should we go?
We'll say, why don't you transition and talk about Team Tennessee, which as well, hitters up and down the lineup.
Yeah, so Team Tennessee's tough. I mean, we already talked earlier about Dominic Cordero. Well, Jose Cordero leads us off for Team Tennessee. Super talented. Definitely one to watch, not only here, but in Fargo. A little further up, you got Carson Dupil. Alex Ropsky had a really good Southeast regions and is definitely one to watch. Maybe a name that a lot of people may not necessarily know, but definitely one to watch. Jarvis Little, Hunter Sturgill. At 160 pounds, well, we got Max Norman again. I mean, yeah,
They're doing double duty.
Go ahead and wrestle 16 U's and then go on over to Oklahoma and get some more action in.
Which, can we talk about the run of 2 weekends he will have if he's able to make 2 all-tournament teams?
Yeah, I wonder if that's ever happened before.
I'll tell you this, I don't remember it happening. Because you remember, I also was in the era that you couldn't do that. I wrestled schoolboy cadet junior. You couldn't do both because I think McCrary wanted to do both, and it was USA Wrestling. I was like, no, you can't do that. So I don't even know if it was a possibility.
All right. Well, you know what? Shout out to Max Norman for taking on the challenge. It'll be interesting to see how he does. The rest of the squad for Team Tennessee is also super talented up top. You got Jake Stacy, Thomas Stadel, Kendrick Curtis. It'll be interesting. I think Tennessee is competitive. I like the run that you talked about with Georgia, with Antonio Mills. You could start a lot of places. That's pretty tough. Let's transition to Team Florida, and they have a run of their own, kind of in at least a couple of those weight classes that they're going to be tough as hell too.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that run where you go Vasquez, Washburn, DeGennaro, Fretwell, Paragon, Heap, and then up top you have Van Ryder, Wolf, and Rodriguez. It's a good squad. You got Franklin Ordonez as well on the bench there. I don't know if they have enough. I think. Actually, because you always like to put me on the spot, my turn for a minute. Jason, who of this juniors group do you think will place the highest this weekend?
Oh, out of all of them?
Out of the Southeast, who do you think places the highest?
Well, I think draws really matter a lot. So, I mean,
assuming everything's equal, assuming all things being equal, that nobody gets a horrific draw.
So if all draws are equal and the rosters that we've been given end up being the rosters.
Yes, that's the big one. Yes.
All right. Then the truth of the matter is Team Georgia has the fewest holes. So they have the best opportunity because I'll tell you what, you get some killers in certain weight classes and you give up 5, 5, 5. Man, 15 points against, you've got to go out there and get a point. You got to go out there. I mean, if you draw, I don't know, Anthony Knox from New Jersey or whatever, and you know that you're going to take the L, you got to go out there and battle and at least get something.
Just find a way to push him out, get him to punch you in the face, have him throw a Luke Lillidahl knee at you and get a point. Do something.
Right, because that's huge. It's just simply huge. Now, Florida's got some absolute studs, so do the other teams. And, you mentioned Florida with, DeGennaro and Fretwell. And I will say before I move to actually a pick that I think is a dark horse, but Franklin Ordonez will probably lead or be the Greco for Florida. And Ordonez is absolutely 100% fantastic at Greco. He is absolutely top notch. I wouldn't be surprised if he's somewhere very high on the podium, maybe at the top of the podium in Fargo if he goes. In Greco. He's super, super good. Now, the dark horse, Team Alabama. Team Alabama, Brody Christmas.
We didn't even talk about Alabama yet.
Brody Christmas, 8-0 in freestyle, 8-0 in Greco last year. Wallace Blue has a lot of experience as well. And then you get like Isaiah Poe, Deshaun Poe, Will Conlon, Mason Ellis, who is a 2-time Fargo All-American last year in 16U, Willie Cox, who is a Fargo All-American in Greco. Team Alabama's good.
They are. No, I completely forgot. Ladies and gentlemen, my spreadsheet cut off at a certain point, but I see Alabama now. So my mistake on that front. But no, absolutely.
Yeah.
They are they are the definition of a dark horse, where they got a couple of guys where we know what they can do. If they get enough production as some of the other guys on their roster, they might be able to make a deep run, look for a top 15 finish.
Yeah, well, and we talked about it, and we're going to wrap it up. But the truth of the matter is your team, your team is best served by the individuals who are going to go like 3-5 on the weekend. And if they can score points in their losses, it is, I can't overstate how important it is.
Or if they could find a way to snag a big win in a dual meet where maybe the team's down a couple points and it's a swing match and both teams have a guy who's maybe on the up and up and you could snag a win. I mean, it's one of those things.
Right.
So it's for sure going to be a fun weekend of wrestling. Lots of stuff going on for the Southeast. I mean, Jason, how do you – let me ask you this. Of the 3 events, what one are you most interested about?
So the juniors, junior girls, or the 14-year girls? So not like either of the other ones, but I'm really interested in the junior girls. I mean, I think the junior girls, there's some teams from the Southeast. I am super interested to see how they stack up against the best in the country. And I think they have a shot.
I completely agree with you. But for me, and it funnily enough, shout out to the junior boys, I'm just fascinated in 14U girls, being that it is a newer event. I'm fascinated to see how our 3 Southeastern teams get on. Like we said, a couple holes on each of them, but I'm just fascinated at the event as a whole.
Well, first, we'd like to say best of luck to everybody traveling out there. I think they actually get started on Wednesday. I'm not sure exactly who starts us off, but shout out to them and best of luck to all the teams traveling. A tip of the cap to everyone who competed this past weekend or this past several days in a row. There were some outstanding individuals, and I think you and I will probably be talking about them when we get the Fargo rosters, because it probably has, I mean, it's a little foreshadowing of what could happen in Fargo.
Yeah, and that's what I love about National Duels. Is it's kind of just like a little, it's like not even an appetizer because we got a little bit. It's like a confit. It's like just a little. It's like we're just getting the starter of what may turn out to be some of these Fargo seedings and brackets, and it's a fascinating tournament. I always love National Duels. The one time I was able to go, we were up in Pennsylvania, and it was a lot of fun. It was a great weekend.
Yeah, I remember my time. Duels didn't exist when I wrestled, but I was the team leader for Team Florida to take them to the cadets out to Colorado when we were out there.
Okay.
And
I didn't know that actually. Okay.
I took Team Florida out to Oklahoma. Sam Hazewinkle was on our team, my team from back then.
Jason.
So it was a lot of fun. It was always fun to take them out to the duels because the duels are just I mean, if you've ever been on the floor of the duels or Fargo is just like a circus. I mean, it's you got the big tent and you got the main stage and everything else is going on, and it's just kind of crazy. The duels, it's like the duels that you see here in the state of Georgia or down in the Southeast. I mean, there's a lot of they're cheering for each other. Winners win by Team Iowa. That came from their duels. So,
I got one.
It's just fun. Yeah, go ahead.
I got one last little thing that happened in the wrestling world. And Jason, you've been around the wrestling world for so long. I want your opinion on something.
Okay.
3-point takedown. How do you feel?
I was wondering if we were going to get to that.
I want to know, what do you think of it? Just a quick, thoughts.
Yeah, because we're going to wrap this up. But I will say, it'll be really interesting to see how the tactics change. And
the thing is, for me as a guy who likes to get in the trenches, it changes the way you have to look at matches now. Because now a 3-1 match is a takedown, not the time, but for the lead. So you have defensively to play differently. And as well as a guy who likes bottom, it almost takes out the idea of it makes picking bottom a little bit less rewarding.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be super interesting. I think you're going to have to watch to see the tactics, because I think that you're right. 3 points at the end of a match, of a 3-1 match. I love the fact that it's still in doubt. And yeah, it might get somebody to. Is it going to make them, play defense more? No, they're going to be defensive anyway. But you have an opportunity for a win, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I do like that it kind of puts you in a position where now being down 3-1, 4-1, it's not, hey, we got to get 2 takedowns. It's, hey, we just got to go get a takedown. We got to go find one. So that's what I like about it. I feel like it does push the sport. Look, at this point, can we just wrestle freestyle? At this point, can we just wrestle freestyle and just call it a day? I'm sorry. It's getting to that point where I feel like that's where we're heading. And I'm not saying soon, but I feel like that's where all roads lead, is eventually we're just wrestling freestyle.
So you know what? I love the questions that you asked this week, and I want to shout out. I want to go ahead and put it on to any of the people who are watching. You should comment. Do you like 3-point takedown? Do you not like the 3-point takedown? Yeah. Do you think that there's somebody we missed that we should take that we should have highlighted? Is there a team that you think is going to make a run? Are the Georgia junior girls going to win it all? Give us some feedback. We want to know.
Oh, I'm still yelling 2.
Yeah.
I'm not yelling 3. I'm not. It's just not.